Hi there, welcome to Rent Prep for Landlords. I'm Andrew Schultz, Community Manager here at Rent Prep. I'm also a licensed real estate broker in the state of New York with over 15 years of experience in the property management and rental property industries. On today's episode, we're going to be wrapping up our mini-series on house hacking. This is the third and final video in the multi-part series. So if you haven't seen video 1 on the basics of house hacking or video 2 on how to finance your house hack, go ahead and check those out as well. Today, we're actually going to be giving you some tips on how to operate your house hack successfully. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Most house hacks are pretty straightforward. Typically, someone will own a home and they'll have friends or family members rent bedrooms in the home to help them offset their cost of mortgage, or possibly even offset the entire cost of the mortgage and other expenses, depending on what the rents are in the bedrooms. A lot of these types of scenarios are handled with simple handshake agreements between parties. When you're dealing with friends and family member, oftentimes you feel like a simple handshake agreement is fine and you don't need anything more with that. And oftentimes they work out pretty well until something happens and suddenly it doesn't work out as well as everyone thought anymore. Some formality can go a long way to help you resolve a lot of those problems. Not every house hack is just friends or family members sharing a home either. House hacking is a good option for people who are looking to reduce their overall living expenses while sharing their home with other people that they may not know. In situations like this, obviously more formality is going to be needed, but how formal does it need to be? What do I need to do to make sure that I'm operating this house hack legally? Let's start by briefly talking about laws and zoning. Every property has allowed and disallowed uses. Most house hacks are not going to require specialized zoning or anything like that, but I have seen scenarios where house hacks would be considered something like a rooming house or something along those lines, and then they would be subject to extra code, extra inspections, extra scrutiny, extra regulation, things of that nature. I don't know the laws in your area, and I recommend that you do some research to find out and understand what the laws are in your area with regards to any sort of a house hack scenario that you're trying to implement. It's also a good idea to note that if you are in an HOA or a COA community, there may be even further restrictions, such as number of people that can live in the building or number of vehicles that can be parked in the driveway or what have you. Essentially what I'm saying here is spend some time being your own advocate. Do a little bit of research on the front end before you jump into the deep end of the pool to ensure that you are not stepping into the deep end, if you will. Make sure that you are able to do what you want to do and that you understand what the laws and regulations are regarding what you're trying to do with your house hack before you jump into a house hack scenario. Now, with regards to code, it's a good idea to make sure that your home meets current codes as required prior to even considering a house hack. I'm not saying that you should invite the county building inspector in, but there are a lot of common sense items out there that people miss all the time. Things like smoke and CO detectors, loose railings, things of that nature. If there are major concerns in the home, those need to be addressed up front before you even consider inviting people to live in the home with you. Obviously, the home needs to be safe for anyone that's going to be living in it, whether it's you or a tenant or whoever. I'd like to think that this doesn't need explanation, but my experiences over the past several years tell me that we do need to talk about it. So I'm not saying that you need to read the code book cover to cover, but if you spend time walking around the home and addressing concerns that you find as you walk around and find them, you're going to end up eliminating a lot of the stuff that a code enforcement person or a zoning person or a building code enforcement officer would be looking for when they go through and look at a home. In some areas, you will need to obtain a rental license or a rental permit or whatever it happens to be called in your area. And more often than not, in situations where the municipality is requiring additional licensing or permitting, they're going to pop an inspection on you as well. So more than likely, if you're in that scenario, you will wind up with an inspection, whether you necessarily want one or not. Making sure that you go ahead and eliminate as many code issues as you can before having the inspector come out can go a long way in making sure that your inspection runs a little bit more smoothly. Now let's talk about screening your potential tenants. You should screen every applicant for your house hack the same way that you would screen a normal tenant. I recommend having a good set of fair housing compliance screening criteria, just the same as you would for any other tenant, and follow those criteria explicitly for every single applicant. For instance, if you have an income requirement that is 3 times the rent net income, that needs to be the criteria that you compare all of your applications to across the board for your house hack. If you have a credit score requirement, let's say you have a 600 credit score requirement, that needs to be the same criteria that you're using across the board. You may be checking employment and landlord references. If you do, make sure you do it for every applicant. If you're doing credit and background checks, make sure that you do it on every single person that meets your criteria. Fair housing concerns essentially start when you treat one person differently than you would treat another person, or you treat someone in a way that would disadvantage them when it comes to renting housing. In some instances, you may find that you have an exemption to fair housing because you're living in the property. Honestly, from where I'm sitting at, there's really never a reason to violate fair housing law, whether you're living in the property or not. I would go above and beyond here and just make sure that you are following fair housing guidelines when doing your house hack. You may find that you don't need to, but from a moral and ethical standpoint, I think that it's something that's worth considering, even if you do qualify for that exemption. Having that set of fair housing compliance screening criteria goes a long way, especially when you follow it every single time that you screen an applicant. We've spoken at great length on screening tenants in other episodes of the podcast, as well as in other videos that we've published. So go ahead and check those out for more information on tenant screening. Or if you're ready to screen a tenant, you can head on over to rentprep.com and purchase a screening package today. Now, when it comes to friends or family members who want to move into your house hack, you have to understand that it can become a sticky situation. You're going to be put in a position where you're going to have access to personal data about these people, such as credit, background check information, criminal background possibly. You may know more about someone than they realize when you go ahead and run your credit and background checks and do your tenant screening. Obviously, you need to keep this information private, especially if you're in a situation where everyone in the house knows everyone else. You can't share information from one person to another. And if they qualify for the apartment after you screen them, you're now going to be in a position where they're responsible to you for a rent payment, and you're responsible to them for safe and secure housing. This changes the dynamic of any relationship, even if it's your best friend or your closest cousin. You need to be prepared for that going in. Even if you operate your house hack as a professional, they may still see you as a friend or a family member and expect a break, or they may expect you to go easy, or they may expect you to not enforce that rule on them. If you aren't able to have the tough talks with these people, or you would not feel confident confronting that person if things went wrong, then you probably should not consider them for your house hack. Having a lease as well as having house rules is an absolute must in my opinion for any house hack. Once you've screened your applicant and you've decided that you want to rent to them, you need to prepare both a lease agreement as well as, I recommend, a set of house rules that are agreed to as well. The lease would be your more formal agreement discussing the rent, when it's due, what's included, what utilities are included, and all of the typical things that you would find in a lease. Your lease should reference the house rules, and a current copy should be attached to the lease at the time of execution. Now, depending on your state, you may be able to write into your lease that the tenants are subject to the house rules, which can be modified at any time, or could be modified with X amount of notice, or what have you, depending on your state's laws. This is something that you really need to check with your state laws and see if it's going to be allowed in your area or not, because this does help to make the day-to-day management of your house hack a little bit easier. Talking more about the house rules, this is where I would specify things like dishes need to be washed after use, or trash needs to be taken out every Tuesday night, or things of that nature. As I mentioned, it's more of the day-to-day stuff that could, in my opinion, cause a conflict. I like having this separate from the lease because if you have, say, 2 roommates that bring a concern to you, all 3 of you can work to resolve the concern, and you can adjust the house rules without necessarily needing to redraft everyone's lease. It seems silly to have to spell out so much, but sometimes people get very, very picky over things that wouldn't even be a concern to someone else. And when you're dealing with a situation where you have multiple different people with different personalities and different ways of living all under one roof, there's bound to be conflicts at one point or another. Having a good lease and having a good set of house rules will go a long way in helping you to reduce the amount of conflict overall, as well as help you to de-escalate conflict when it does happen. The last thing that I want to leave you with on this topic is to treat this like the business that it truly is. Keep accurate records, including your accounting records. Keep your paperwork sorted out. Keep your expenses in check. Keep your attitude professional and keep building your future. That's what this is all about at the end of the day. House hacking is an awesome way to jump into real estate investing with less out of your pocket than you may typically expect. Operating your house hack like a professional will help set you apart and provide you and your tenants with a great living experience. So there you have it, how to operate a house hack. As I mentioned, this is the third and final video in our multi-part series on house hacking, and I hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoy these mini-series, let us know and we'll start producing more of this style of content. Are you currently operating a house hack? Drop us a comment down below and let us know how it's going. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Andrew Schultz with RentPrep.com, and we'll talk to you soon.